here. And today we are going to be looking at strange science phenomena. Okay, so what does this mean? Maybe you've heard of the word phenomena before, but what that is basically things that happen that you can't really explain or that don't seem to be explainable. Things that are spooky, kind of crazy. No one really knows what's going on. We're going to see if we could tie some science behind it to make more sense of it. Okay. And the cool part about this is actually really similar to our, Bermuda Triangle. That could be considered a strange science phenomena. So we're going to talk about a couple more that I got some questions about that we're going to kind of go through. Okay. So we're going to go through 3 of them today. The first question I had, this is a while back, someone asked about the Chernobyl mutated animals. So if this makes no sense to you, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and explain it. All right. So here's what happened, guys. In 1968, which was so many years ago, there was a nuclear power plant, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine. Okay, so this is in Europe over there. Now, a nuclear power plant is made up of nuclear reactors, all right? And what a nuclear reactor is it's basically this container that controls nuclear fission reactions, okay? So nuclear fission is when in the nucleus of an atom, remember we talked about atoms a while back. Now the atom has a nucleus. Remember I talked about the nucleus? When the nucleus of the atom splits up, that is called a fission reaction. And it releases energy when it does that, as in the form of heat. And heat ends up making steam.
What's going on?
Sorry, what was that? Okay, so heat produces steam and that makes electricity, okay? So that's how nuclear power plants work, is that you have this container that stores these like fission reactions where we have atoms splitting up and releasing energy, and then we're able to capture that energy into a wind turbine that produces electricity, okay? Now, here's what happened at Chernobyl, right? Now, you might be thinking, well, this was contained, right? They have big containers to house these reactions because there's tons of energy going on, crazy stuff. Now, here's the problem. An untrained crew decided to carry out an electrical test on one of those reactors. Remember, our reactors are the containers. And the test caused the reactor to be unstable, right? They played around with how much power, how much energy was going to be released by the atoms. They were kind of messing with that, which ended up putting those atoms in a very dangerous position. And the reactor also had design issues. It wasn't really well designed to hold this much energy in these many fission reactions. So what happens, guys? Well, that led to an uncontrolled amount of fission where we had atoms splitting like crazy and releasing so much energy that it broke free from the reactor container. A steam explosion occurred, which makes sense. You have all this fission, all this energy, and it comes out as steam. But we also ended up releasing lots of radioactive contamination. And I'll talk a little bit about what radioactivity means, but I want you to understand what actually happened at Chernobyl. It was these nuclear fission reactions, the atoms and nucleus splitting, and it was so much energy that broke the container. Okay, so here's a photo here of like some guys taking pictures of the what happened in the aftermath of it.
There's actually multiple types of radiation.
Exactly. There are multiple types. So going on to now, let's see. So I said mutated animals. So around Chernobyl, there's animals that look strange. They look different than animals normally do. So over here, right, you got this, like, I think it's a goat. The goat has legs coming out of its back. This is very odd, very uncommon. Why, right? And over here, you have this animal. It looks like a cow with a dog hybrid or something, just very deformed animals that were produced after Chernobyl. And people wondered, well, why? Why did this energy release cause this? So really, guys, here's what radiation is. Radiation is energy that travels through a space and other materials. So energy that travels through air, and the other material can be skin or cells. Now, large amount of fission happening at uncontrolled rates that cause the reactor to explode. We had fission, tons of energy. Well, that energy, guys, qualifies as radiation. So we know where the energy comes from. It came from all these fission reactions being released into open air as opposed to staying in the container. But how does it actually make strange animals? Like, what is the genetic change that's going on here? All right. So when radiation penetrates our cells, remember we did a lesson on cells, it might not damage DNA, but it can if it feels like it. If radiation does interact with the DNA, it could do one of three things, okay? It can mess up the chemical structure of the bases. And we talked about this a while back, but bases are here, 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 these like colorful things on my picture. That's your genetic code. That's what makes everyone different. It makes the proteins different. It can break up the hydrogen bonds between those base pairs. So it'll actually split up these colored pairs. You see how they're like kind of linked together. Radiation can also break up the sugar phosphate backbone. The twisty part of the licorice can be broken by radiation. And a lot of times DNA is good. It'll be like, I noticed something's wrong. Let me repair it myself. But sometimes DNA can be bad and it doesn't realize there's a mutation, and it's going to cause a permanent damage that will lead to these incorrect proteins being produced, and the animal's skin, hair, eyes, lots of things will be messed up. When in terms of now, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, okay, these are modern day pictures. Now, Chernobyl happened in did I say 1968? It's 1986. This is a long time ago, right? What's going on? However, blood and reproductive cells are most sensitive to radiation. So if these animals had parents or grandparents that were around when Chernobyl happened and they really got exposed to serious radiation, their reproductive cells could have been affected, and this could have led to these mutated offspring. Okay, so it's not necessarily that these animals are experiencing tons of radiation. They might in that area. I mean, there's still radioactivity there, but if their parents did and they passed on the cells to them that were damaged, then the children will be messed up. Okay. Any questions about Chernobyl before I move on? Anything?
One thing is that in the time that this blowed up, Ukraine belonged to the Soviet Union.
Yeah. USSR. You're right.
Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Yeah, there was this was a while back. But yeah, no, it's super interesting. And this area still to this day, people cannot live in, like, I think it's like a certain kilometer radius of the area because it's still considered radioactive. There's so much energy in the air. So it's pretty wild. All right, so next thing we're going to talk about is quicksand. Someone asked, well, how does quicksand work? This is a while back, and I thought it's in this like strange science category. So here's what quicksand is. Quicksand appears to be alive, right? It sucks people into its trap, and you guys know that the more you struggle in quicksand, the deeper you fall, okay? Obviously a problem. So really what quicksand is, it's a grainy soil or like a loose sand that has become saturated by water. And if the water cannot escape, it ends up making a liquefied soil that collapses under its own weight as opposed to holding up the loose sand as a solid. So if you think about it, guys, you know, a solid can hold up, it stays. A liquid can't, right? A liquid, when you push like into water, it goes down. A liquid doesn't hold its shape. And that's what ends up happening when we pour water into this sandy soil. Typically, the soil and sand particles have lots of friction. They're moving against each other, whatnot. But adding water to the sand particles pushes them apart from each other. And they lose their strength that they had as a solid, and they turn into a liquid. Okay, and a little bit of water is fine. If you think about when you go to the beach and maybe you make a sandcastle and you need that sticky sand to make your sandcastle, a little bit of water does allow the sand particles to pack together into clump. But when you put so much water, the sand particles are pushed apart, and that's where we see the problem with quicksand. okay? We're talking about, well, how do you escape quicksand? If you want to escape, you just float. And here's why this actually makes sense, okay? The human body is less dense than quicksand. And density is basically how much mass you have in a given area. So the human body has less mass in like if you took a square of yourself than a square of water would have. Or I'm sorry, a square of quicksand, that's what I meant. Now, less dense objects are going to float on more dense objects. So if you stop swimming in the water and you just let yourself float because you're less dense than that sandy water muck, you will actually escape. There's not really sucking you in, and it's going to help you come up. Now, some quicksand is easier to escape than others. Why do you think that quicksand varies and how easy it is to escape? Any guesses?
Because of the water content.
Yeah, right. So it really depends on your sand-water ratio. If you have more sand, it's going to be harder to escape. It's going to be harder to float because sand is going to be pretty dense. So it depends on how much sand you have in there. That's going to really determine whether or not you can float like you would on water, or if you are going to sink because it's more of a sandy mixture. If you make slow movements to get into a floating position, you'll be good. But if you go really quickly, you're going to cause a lot of friction, and that's going to really increase the stickiness of the quicksand. Okay, so quicksand
Excuse
really,
me?
yeah.
Can you make quicksand with just like one like a cup of water and one grain of sand?
Well, we're actually doing an experiment today with quicksand, so we'll take a look. I have something for you. I think you could use sand, I suppose, but I guess you could use sand if you wanted to. There's really, I mean, that is the basis of quicksand. Just make sure it's a very loose kind of soil, it's very loose and it's not clumping together, because that really allows you to fully saturate it as you need it to make that quicksand. Okay, and then the last science strange phenomena we're going to talk about is the hiccup, okay? You all know what hiccups are. Everyone's had hiccups. And really where hiccups come from is the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a muscle in between your lungs and your stomach. It's right here, this like pink, I don't know, little muscle right here. That's under your diaphragm. When you inhale air into your lungs, you push down on your diaphragm. And when you exhale, you release that tension that's on your diaphragm. And it really aids your lungs. The reason you even have a diaphragm, it aids your lungs with taking in air. It helps them really expand your body so you get lots of air coming in. Now, diaphragm movements are really fluid. It's something like very natural that you do when you breathe. You don't even think about it. But if something tickles your diaphragm, it'll cause a spasm. And that's what that's going to do, is that it's going to redirect the air you take in to your throat instead of your lungs. So typically diaphragm helps to get the air, we're getting air flowing into your lungs. When the diaphragm is like tickled or has a spasm, the air is actually going to go into your throat. And that redirect causes your vocal cords to actually close shut. And that's what makes the hiccup sound. So if you look over here, guys, in this little diagram of the lady, the glottis is open when you are taking in air. It's just really natural flowing. It goes into your lungs. But when we have a spasm, that air is like pushed up into our vocal cords and our throat, and it closes and it makes this like snapping hiccup sound. In terms of like what causes hiccups, overeating, spicy food, those kinds of things can tickle your diaphragm short term. Long term, though, some people will have like a permanent hiccup sort of scenario, and that's caused by damage to the nerves that control the diaphragm, which is your vagus and your phrenic nerves. If you look down here, those yellow nerves, that would be your phrenic nerve. If those are damaged, it'll change the way your diaphragm functions, and it'll cause that permanent hiccup issue, if that makes sense. Okay. So really, it all has to do with the diaphragm and whether or not something kind of poked it, and if the air is going to the right place. Any questions on that?
I know like there's some things that might help hiccups, like
Yeah,
drinking
Well-
cold water.
drinking
I
cold
don't know.
water.
I don't know how that relaxes your diaphragm though.
I think really, another cause of hiccups is if you have a sudden change in temperature. So if you go from like super cold to super hot, that can change it. So I suppose that can maybe help with temperature regulation. But it's all really about anything that'll like soothe your diaphragm is going to be good. But the problem is, it's not like you can like go into your body and like be like diaphragm stop. You're kind of like spot treating it, but you don't know if it's actually working. So that's why a lot of those remedies sometimes work, sometimes don't, because it really depends on if the diaphragm feels like being affected by it or not. All right. So now it's time for our experiment. This is the exciting part. I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, cool. So experiment today is actually pretty cool. So we've been talking about quicksand a lot. And now we're actually going to make our own little quicksand, and we're going to demonstrate some of those things that we were talking about, how it's kind of a solid, kind of a liquid, what's actually going on here. So first thing, I'm going to try to position my camera properly. My hands are going to get a little messy, so I may have to, we'll see how this works, okay? So here's what I got here. I'll try to position this so you can see my bowl. If not, I'll show you what I'm doing. But here we go. I just have a metal bowl. And ooh, you know what? It actually be. Hold on a minute. I'm gonna move you guys up here because I think this will be a better position for you. Yeah, that's good. Now you can see what I'm actually doing. Okay, cool. So let me move my bowl back a little bit. So
Does it have to be metal?
no, it could be any bowl. I just have a metal bowl, and I think it's nice and easy to see it. So here's the first thing, guys. I have this at Jewel, just cornstarch. I'm sure your parents have this in the house somewhere. You might have used it for a science experiment. I have some cornstarch, which I'm just going to dump into my bowl, okay?
Is cornstarch similar to sand?
It is similar to sand in that, get this out of here, in that the particles aren't, they're pretty loose. You're not going to, sorry, I'm just trying to rip this here. The particles are nice and loose. They stay pretty loose for the most part. That's why it's so powdery. And it doesn't really clump together much unless you add water, which we'll start doing. Okay.
One way they're different is because cornstarch you can actually use to make foods. Well, sand you can only make sandcastles out of.
That's a good point. That's actually a very good point.
And cornstarch can also be used to make oobleck, which is
oobleck, that's something else you can make with cornstarch. Okay, so here we go. I have this, and we're going to start. Now I have some water here in my bottle. And I'm going to start pouring in water, and we're going to take a look at what the consistency is like at different steps. So I poured in a good amount of water. Now I'm just going to start mashing this around. Let's see what we get here. So right now, guys, this is kind of that phenomena I was talking about. You know, when you make a sandcastle, how you want it to be kind of clumpy? That's what we're getting. Okay, I'm not saying huge, like it's super liquidy or anything like that. Just kind of getting clumpy, which if you were making a sandcastle and you kind of want some clump, that's good. So what I mean by that is like, here you go. You see now I'm kind of getting these pieces, okay? That's fine. We want to see what else is going on here. So I'm going to keep going with my water. Okay, that was a pretty.
In the water, to me, it looked like spoiled milk.
Yeah, now it does look like spoiled milk. So now, okay, things are getting a little different. So we're going to keep going with this. I'm trying to get I have lots of cornstarch on the sides over here, so I want to get that good stuff. And I'm just going to keep going with this. Now we are a lot more liquidy, and you can see this here. It's a lot more liquidy, okay?
Now it looks like milk.
Now it looks like milk, okay? So in hindsight, now every good scientist sometimes has an experiment not go so well. I think I poured a little bit too much liquid here. So in this case, this would almost be more, I would say when I'm talking about the quicksand and like that sand to water ratio we were talking about, this would probably be a little bit too much water. But basically what I have going on here is that this now is super duper liquidy. And when I try to like put my hand in it, which I think you all can see, if I try moving around, I'm only going down more. So I have this like goofy consistency. Now here's the weird part. This is what I want to show you. The quicksand, you can see it like when I'm like this with it, it's real liquidy. Okay, you guys see how liquidy it is? How I'm like draining.
Real liquidy.
Yeah. Now here's what's strange. If you think about like if you were to like hit a bottle of water, hit something on water, how it would kind of like you know how like how basically your hand would just fall right in. This doesn't. This has a solid property to it. So when I hit it, it kind of is like more of a solid. It feels like a solid. I know you guys can't feel it. You're probably like,
It
Ava,
reminds me of oobleck.
yeah, it is kind of like oobleck. But when I hit it, it's actually kind of solid, right? It is solidifying. And this is to show you guys that the property of when we're talking about quicksand, it's like kind of a solid, kind of a liquid. That's where you're getting at, where you think you're walking on solid ground, but it actually does have liquid property to it. Because even though it seems solid, that water is separating the sand particles. So if I kind of like hit it, it's not like, it's not that liquidy. It's not as liquidy as you think. It has a hard top to it, which is very strange to see that. So
I just realized why oobleck can be solid.
yeah, so that's why you kind of get the solid. So like if I were to if I'm to allow like go like this, it's all liquidy. But when I hit it, I'm not really experiencing. Remember, I'm not like tapping it. Like I'm actually giving it a good whack. I don't really, this is more of a solidy top. So it's very strange phenomena. And this is the kind of stuff that you see when you're dealing with quicksand, is that you think it's solid because the top appears solid, but definitely has some liquid properties to it, okay? Any questions on the experiment today? You guys, if you want to try this at home, it's super simple. All you need is cornstarch and water. And if I were to do this again, I'd probably put in a little less water. I think would help. But do you guys have any questions about this?
I don't have any questions, but I realized that thing right there might just be oobleck.
Now, doesn't oobleck take glue, or am I thinking of something different? I'm not sure. It's very similar though to oobleck in that you're using cornstarch and water and kind of getting this stickiness. But yeah. And even what's weird too, guys, is like it starts to, in my hands, when I rub my hands, it starts to like ball up a little bit. And that's it. That's that solid property. This is not totally a liquid. I'm not just able to like push my hand through it and say, hey, like this is all it does. It does have this solidness to it. All right. Any questions? You guys feel pretty good? All right. Well, awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed summer science. Unfortunately and sadly, I'm gonna get my face in here. This is gonna be our last meeting, okay? But I really enjoyed working with you all. I hope you all learned something and maybe something new, something old came up and you made connections between the stuff we learned. But please keep asking questions, keep being awesome young scientists, and I hope to see you soon, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Hey,
Bye,
after
guys.
you graduate from college, could you finally do another meeting where you could forget about
Maybe, you know what?
that?
Maybe I should do a continuation of it. Yeah, no. Keep asking questions like these. There's so many answers that you have yet to discover. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.